The small diner sat on a quiet street corner, tucked between a row of aging shops and a busy traffic light. Its sign was faded, but the smell of fresh bread and hot coffee made it easy to find. Inside, the morning sunlight filtered through dusty windows, casting a warm glow across the worn wooden tables. It was early, but the waitress was already moving with practiced speed, wiping counters and arranging chairs before the rush began. She was young, barely out of her teens, but her eyes carried a quiet determination. Life had not been easy for her, and it showed in the lines that came too early on her face. Every day was a struggle. Every day demanded patience, endurance, and a smile that she had learned to wear even when her heart was heavy. The diner was her workplace, yes, but it was also her stage, her small world where she kept going despite everything else that was difficult in her life. Her family depended on her. Her mother was sick most of the time, too weak to work, and her younger brother was still in school. They had bills to pay, rent that never seemed to get any cheaper, and debts that loomed over their small apartment like dark clouds. Yet every morning she got up before the sun, tied her hair back, and put on her apron with a sense of quiet pride. She had no time to complain. She had no choice but to keep moving. As she worked, she greeted the few early customers with a bright smile, though her eyes sometimes betrayed the exhaustion she tried so hard to hide. She knew the routine by heart: take orders, refill coffee cups, carry plates of steaming food, and make sure everyone left satisfied. She did it all, and she did it with care. Even when the tips were small, even when her feet ached and her back was sore, she carried herself with dignity. That dignity was her shield, her way of reminding herself that she mattered, that her effort counted for something even if the world often seemed indifferent. She paused for a moment by the counter, wiping it again despite it being freshly cleaned. Her hands moved automatically, yet her mind wandered. She thought about her little brother and how he had a school project due today. She hoped he had finished it on time, though she knew she had no energy to check. She thought about the bills on the kitchen table, the envelope marked with the electric company's name, and the rent that was due in just a few days. The worries weighed heavily, but she had learned to carry them silently. The diner door opened with a soft jingle, and a cold breeze swept in. She looked up and offered a polite smile to the man who had just come in. He nodded in response, settling into a corner booth with a newspaper. She moved past him, carrying a tray of fresh toast and eggs for another customer. Every interaction mattered. Every gesture, no matter how small, was a chance to show kindness in a world that often forgot how to be gentle. Despite the hard work, she found small moments of joy in the day. The laughter of children running by outside, the smell of freshly baked bread, and the occasional thank you from a grateful customer reminded her that life still had beauty, even in hardship. She clung to these small sparks. They were like little lanterns guiding her through the long, difficult days. By mid-morning, the diner began to fill. Workers on break, elderly men with time to kill, and a few students looking for a quick snack crowded the tables. She moved among them, taking orders and listening with polite attention. She noticed the patterns of their lives, the tired sighs, the casual jokes, the hurried glances at watches. It was a world she observed closely, learning from it while staying apart from it. She was part of this world, yet somehow always separate, carrying her own burdens quietly. Her own lunch break came and went without notice. There was no time, no energy, and even if there had been, she had no appetite. She sipped cold coffee from a chipped mug, letting the bitter taste remind her that even small comforts required effort. Her uniform felt heavy on her shoulders, the apron tying her to her work, to her responsibilities, and to the people who relied on her. She felt tired, yet she kept moving. She always kept moving. She liked to imagine a different life sometimes, a life where she did not have to worry about money or sickness or time. A life where she could simply be herself, without constantly carrying the weight of others on her shoulders. But these thoughts were fleeting, like clouds passing across the sun. Reality was always there, grounding her, reminding her of the responsibilities she could not escape. As the clock in the diner ticked toward noon, a sense of anticipation filled the air. Lunch would bring more customers, more orders, more work. She adjusted her apron one last time and took a deep breath. She told herself she could handle it. She always could. She had to. And then, just as she was wiping a table near the window, the door opened again, letting in a soft gust of autumn air. Her eyes caught a small figure standing hesitantly just inside. It was a little girl, no more than 6 or 7, looking shy and unsure. Her clothes were simple, slightly worn, and her eyes seemed to hold a quiet sadness. The waitress's heart softened immediately. She had seen many children in the diner, but something about this one made her pause. There was a loneliness there that tugged at her. The girl stepped forward slowly, her small hand clutching a crumpled little bag. She looked around, clearly nervous. The waitress knelt down slightly to meet her eyes and smiled. "Hello there. Would you like to sit here?" she asked gently. The girl nodded, her eyes wide and hesitant. She slid into a chair and the waitress pulled it closer to the counter so she could keep an eye on her. It was a small interaction, but it mattered. In that moment, the waitress forgot her exhaustion, her worries, and her daily struggles. All she could see was this little child, alone in a world that seemed too big and too busy for her. She felt a surge of protective instinct, a desire to make this child feel safe and cared for, even if it was just for a few minutes. The little girl whispered her order, barely audible. The waitress repeated it back, smiling, and promised it would be ready soon. She moved to the kitchen with renewed energy, her steps lighter than before. Somehow, the presence of this child made the day feel different. It reminded her why she did what she did. It reminded her that even small acts of kindness could matter, even in the hardest times. As she worked, she thought about the girl and why she might be alone. She imagined a mother too busy, a father too far away, or perhaps no one at all. Her heart ached at the thought. She knew that life could be lonely, especially for children, and she wanted to do something, anything, to bring a little warmth into that loneliness. She prepared the meal with care, arranging the food on a small tray and carrying it carefully to the little girl. "Here you go," she said softly. "I hope you like it." The girl looked up, a small smile breaking through her shyness. It was a fragile smile, but it was enough to make the waitress feel a spark of hope in her own tired heart. The girl thanked her quietly, and the waitress stayed nearby, chatting gently while she ate. She asked about school, about favorite games, and about friends. The little girl spoke in short sentences, but each one carried a weight of longing and loneliness. The waitress listened, offering words of comfort and kindness, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. For a moment, the busy diner faded away. There were no bills, no debts, no exhaustion. There was only the two of them, sharing a simple human connection in the midst of an ordinary day. It was a small moment, almost invisible to the rest of the world, but it mattered immensely to both of them. The waitress knew the world outside the diner was harsh and unforgiving, and she also knew that this small act would not change that world. But she hoped it might change this little girl's day, if only for a short while. And maybe, she thought, kindness could ripple outward, touching more lives than she could imagine. As the lunch rush began to swell, she returned to her duties with the same care and attention as always. Yet now there was a difference. She moved not just out of obligation, but with a quiet warmth in her heart. She had found a reason to smile through her fatigue, a reason to keep going despite the weight of life. And somewhere in the corner of that small diner, a lonely child felt a little less alone. The little girl sat quietly at her table, her small hands wrapped around the warm cup of cocoa the waitress had brought her. She stared down at it for a moment, almost afraid to take a sip, as if she wasn't used to having someone care enough to make something nice just for her. The waitress knelt beside her chair again, smiling gently. "Go ahead," she said softly. "It's just for you. No one will take it away." The girl's eyes lifted slowly, a flicker of hesitation in them. Then she nodded slightly and took a small sip. Her face brightened for a moment, and she let out a quiet giggle at the warmth of the drink. The waitress's heart swelled. It was a small thing, a tiny smile, but in that moment it felt like the most important thing in the world. The diner had grown busier now. The lunch crowd had arrived in waves, workers chatting loudly, friends laughing across tables, and the clatter of plates and cutlery filling the air. Yet the little girl seemed to exist in a different world, quiet and small in her own corner, holding onto the cup as if it were a treasure. The waitress kept glancing at her, making sure she was okay while still attending to the other customers with practiced efficiency. The little girl finally found the courage to speak. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but the words were clear. I'm waiting for my dad," she said. There was a pause before she added, He's busy a lot. She looked down at her hands again, twisting them nervously in her lap. The waitress felt a pang in her heart. She knew loneliness when she saw it, and she could see it reflected in the little girl's eyes. Sometimes parents are busy, she said gently, choosing her words carefully. But that doesn't mean they don't care. I'm sure he loves you very much. The girl nodded, but her expression didn't change much. There was a sadness there that words could not easily touch. The waitress wanted to do more than just say comforting words. She wanted to make the little girl feel seen, safe, and cared for, even for this brief moment. As the girl sipped her cocoa, the waitress offered a small plate of cookies, placing it carefully in front of her. Here, she said. These are for you. You don't have to share if you don't want to. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. She had not expected such kindness, especially not from someone she had only just met. Slowly, she reached for a cookie, holding it in her tiny hands like it was something precious. The waitress smiled and sat on the edge of the chair across from her. She didn't want to overwhelm the child, but she wanted to show that someone cared. Do you like school? She asked casually, hoping to draw out a small conversation. The girl hesitated, then whispered, I like some things, but I don't have many friends. Her voice broke slightly at the end and she looked down again. The waitress nodded, listening carefully, letting the words hang between them. She understood perfectly. Friendship, especially at a young age, could be fragile. Some children were naturally outgoing, while others carried the weight of their own struggles and fears. You know, the waitress said softly, sometimes it's not about how many friends you have, but how you treat the ones who are kind to you. Even one good friend can make a big difference. She offered a warm smile, hoping the girl could feel her sincerity. The little girl glanced up, a small spark of hope in her eyes. Really? She asked. Really, the waitress replied. Kindness matters more than anything else. Even small acts like sharing a cookie or saying hello can make someone's day better. The girl smiled faintly, and for a brief moment the heaviness in her chest seemed to lift. The waitress knew this smile would not erase all the loneliness, but it was a start. She understood that some wounds were slow to heal, and some hearts were cautious after disappointment. But even a small gesture could plant the seed of trust and warmth. As they sat together, the waitress began to notice small things about the girl. Her shoes were scuffed, and the sleeves of her sweater were a little too short. Her hair was neatly combed, but slightly tangled, as if someone tried to take care of her but didn't have much time. Each detail told a story of a child growing up in a world that was sometimes too big and too harsh. The waitress leaned slightly closer, keeping her voice gentle. Do you like drawing or coloring? She asked. Sometimes it helps to make pictures of the things we feel inside. The girl's eyes brightened at the question. She nodded slowly and reached into her bag, pulling out a small notebook and a few pencils. She began to draw quietly, her little hands moving with care and concentration. The waitress watched her, admiring the effort and focus. She could see that the child was expressing something important through the drawings, even if the words were not yet spoken. While the little girl drew, the waitress continued her work around the diner. She refilled drinks, cleared tables, and greeted new customers with the same gentle smile she had shown all morning. But every now and then she would glance at the girl, checking to make sure she was okay. It was a delicate balance, caring without interfering, watching without hovering. The little girl's drawings were simple but expressive. She drew a small house with a bright sun above it, a garden with flowers, and a little girl standing in the yard smiling. The waitress could see the loneliness in the spaces around the drawing, but also the hope in the little figure she had created. It reminded her that even when life was difficult, children found ways to dream, to imagine a world that was kinder than the one they often faced. As the lunch hour passed, a few customers left and a calm settled over the diner. The waitress knelt again beside the little girl. Your drawings are beautiful, she said warmly. You have a talent for making things look happy. The girl looked up shyly, her cheeks turning a soft pink. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome, the waitress replied. Do you like to tell stories too? Pictures can tell stories, and stories can make pictures even better. The girl nodded, her eyes shining slightly. I like stories, she said softly, but no one really listens to me. The waitress felt a pang in her chest. She knew that feeling well. To be overlooked, to feel invisible, was something she had experienced many times herself. I'll listen, she said sincerely. I want to hear your stories. The girl hesitated, then began to tell a little story about a girl who lived in a big city, but often felt lonely. She spoke quietly, her voice trembling at times, but the waitress gave her her full attention, nodding and encouraging her. She asked questions gently, showing interest without judgment. As the story unfolded, the waitress realized something important. It wasn't just the little girl who needed attention and kindness. It was everyone. People carried their burdens silently, often unnoticed by the world. A simple gesture, a kind word, a patient ear, a shared cookie, could make a difference that was impossible to measure. The little girl finished her story with a small smile. The waitress clapped lightly, careful not to embarrass her. "That was wonderful," she said. "You're very creative. You have a great imagination, and you told your story beautifully." The girl's face lit up, and for a moment the loneliness seemed to fade. She felt seen, heard, and valued. And in that small corner of the diner, something shifted. The waitress felt it too, a warmth in her heart that had little to do with the work she did and everything to do with the connection she had made. Time passed quickly, though neither of them seemed to notice. The waitress had to continue serving the customers, taking orders and cleaning tables. But she kept checking on the little girl, making sure she had everything she needed. She refilled the cocoa, brought more cookies, and offered a napkin when the girl accidentally smudged her drawing. Every small act of care was deliberate, chosen with intention. As the afternoon sun began to cast long shadows across the diner, the little girl finally packed up her notebook and pencils. She looked up at the waitress, her eyes wide and sincere. "Thank you," she said softly. You made my day better." The waitress smiled, her own heart full. "I'm glad," she said. "Remember, even on hard days, someone cares, and even small kindness can make a big difference." The little girl nodded and gave a small wave before stepping out into the street. The waitress watched her go, a strange mix of sadness and hope lingering in her chest. She knew the child's life would still be difficult, but for now, she had given her something important: attention, care, and a moment of genuine happiness. And in that quiet moment, the waitress understood something too. Life was full of struggles, but it was also full of connections. Sometimes the smallest interactions, sharing a cookie, listening to a story, offering a smile, were what made life meaningful. She returned to her work, carrying that warmth with her, ready to face the rest of the day. She didn't know it yet, but this little girl, quiet and lonely, would play a role in a story far bigger than either of them could imagine. The little girl had become a quiet presence in the diner over the past few days. She visited at the same time each afternoon, always alone, always carrying her small bag. The waitress noticed the routine and began to look forward to it, even though her own days were filled with exhausting work. There was something about the child's quiet determination, her shy smiles and the small gestures that spoke of loneliness, that touched the waitress deeply. On this particular afternoon, the diner was busier than usual. Lunch rush had passed, but the scent of coffee, soup, and fresh bread still lingered in the air. The waitress moved quickly between tables, taking orders, serving food, and keeping the pace steady. She barely noticed her own tiredness. It was as if the presence of the little girl gave her energy, a small light to guide her through the routine. The little girl came in quietly, slipping through the door and glancing around the diner before making her way to her usual corner. The waitress saw her immediately and offered a warm smile.
"Hi there," she said gently.
"How was your morning?" The girl shrugged, her small shoulders lifting in a shy, almost nervous motion. "It was okay," she said softly. I had to wait at school." She looked down at her hands, twisting them together. The waitress nodded, understanding that sometimes even the simplest routines could feel heavy for a child. "I bet you were very patient," she said. "Waiting isn't easy, especially when you want to be somewhere else." The girl looked up, a small spark of recognition in her eyes. She had begun to notice that the waitress truly listened, that her words were meant with care and not just said to fill silence. She nodded slowly, clutching her little bag tightly. The waitress noticed that the child seemed quieter today, a little more withdrawn. She wondered what had happened during the morning. Sometimes children faced things adults couldn't even imagine, and the waitress had learned to offer kindness without pressing too hard. She set a small tray of cookies and a warm cup of cocoa in front of the girl. "Here," she said softly. "You look like you could use a little treat. No one will take it, I promise." The girl smiled faintly, a tiny curve of her lips that spoke volumes. She reached for a cookie, holding it carefully as if it were a treasure. She took a small bite, savoring the warmth and sweetness, and for a moment, the weight on her little shoulders seemed lighter. The waitress pulled up a chair beside the table and spoke gently. "Do you want to tell me about your morning?" "Only if you want to, of course." The girl hesitated. She was used to adults who didn't listen, or who were too busy with their own lives to care. But something about the waitress felt different. Her presence was patient and gentle. Her eyes were kind, and her smile never seemed forced. Slowly, the girl began to speak. "My dad, he had a meeting," she said quietly. "He said he would come later, but he was busy. I had to wait alone." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't want to wait, but I couldn't go anywhere." The waitress nodded, understanding the subtle pain in the words. "Sometimes grown-ups have a lot of work," she said softly. "They don't mean to hurt us, but they have responsibilities we can't always see." "It's hard, I know." The girl listened, her eyes searching the waitress's face. For the first time she felt understood, even if only by a stranger in a small diner. She nodded slowly, gripping her little bag. The waitress reached over and placed a hand gently on the girl's, a gesture of comfort that needed no words. "I know it's not the same as having someone there all the time," the waitress continued, "but you are important. Your feelings matter, and sometimes, even a little bit of kindness can make a big difference in a day." The girl's eyes filled slightly, and she nodded again. She had heard many words before, but few had carried the warmth and sincerity of the waitress's voice. She felt safe, if only for a few moments, and it gave her the courage to continue talking. "I drew something this morning," the girl said softly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook, opening it to a page covered with careful, colorful drawings. It's about a girl who waits for someone who is always busy. She feels lonely." The waitress leaned in, her eyes scanning the drawings. She could see the little girl in every stroke of the pencil, the worry, the longing, and the hope she held on to despite the loneliness. "This is beautiful," she said sincerely. "You've put so much feeling into your drawings. I can see the story in every line." The girl's cheeks turned slightly pink and she looked down shyly. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know anyone who really cares." The waitress's heart ached at the words. She knew what it felt like to be overlooked, to feel invisible in a world that often rushed past. "I care," she said gently. "I'm listening, and I want to see more if you want to show me." The girl nodded slowly, gaining confidence. She began to tell the story behind her drawings. She spoke of a girl who waited for her father, who often felt lonely but still held on to hope. She described the streets she imagined, the friends she dreamed of, and the small joys that made her smile. The waitress listened with rapt attention, asking questions when appropriate, encouraging her and never interrupting. The story flowed naturally, a mixture of imagination and real emotion. The little girl's words revealed not just her loneliness but also her resilience. Despite everything, she still dreamed, still hoped, and still believed that the world could be kinder than it often seemed. The waitress felt a connection growing stronger with each passing moment. She realized that her small acts of kindness, the cocoa, the cookies, the patient listening, were doing more than filling a child's afternoon. They were building trust, giving the girl a sense of worth and allowing her to express herself in a way she rarely could. As the afternoon stretched on, the diner quieted. Some customers had left, and the remaining few spoke in low voices, giving the waitress a rare moment to focus fully on the child. She encouraged the girl to draw more, to tell more stories, and to imagine a world where she could be happy and safe. The little girl's drawings became more detailed, her imagination spilling freely onto the pages. She drew a bright sun, green gardens, and a small house where laughter seemed to echo from the walls. She drew a figure she identified as herself, smiling among friends even if they were imaginary. The waitress could see the child's inner world taking shape on the paper. "A mix of hope, longing, and resilience, you know," the waitress said softly. "Your drawings are like little windows into your heart. They show who you are and what you care about. You're very brave to put your feelings on paper." The girl looked up, her eyes wide. "Brave?" she asked. "Yes," the waitress replied. "It takes courage to show your feelings, especially when it's hard to talk about them. You're doing something wonderful by sharing your story." The little girl's small smile grew, a sign that she felt a little lighter, a little less alone. She had begun to trust someone, and the waitress's presence had made that possible. For the waitress, it was a reminder that even the simplest acts of kindness, a smile, a listening ear, a warm drink, could have a profound impact on someone's life. Time moved on, and eventually, the little girl packed her notebook and pencils back into her bag. She looked at the waitress with gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. I feel better today." The waitress smiled warmly, her heart full. "I'm glad," she said. "Remember, even on days that feel lonely, someone cares, and even small moments of kindness can change how we feel." The girl nodded, a small but genuine smile on her face, and stepped out into the cool afternoon air. The waitress watched her go, feeling a mixture of hope and quiet sadness. She knew the child's struggles were far from over, but for now, she had given her something important: attention, understanding, and a sense that someone truly cared. As the waitress returned to her work, a renewed sense of purpose filled her. The diner, the long hours, and the endless tasks were still challenging, but the bond she had formed with this little girl reminded her why she kept going. Life could be difficult, but connections mattered, and small acts of kindness could ripple in ways that were impossible to measure. She cleaned tables, refilled coffee cups, and served the remaining customers with her usual diligence, but her heart carried a quiet warmth. The little girl's presence had reminded her that even in a world full of hardship, human compassion had power. It could heal, it could uplift, and it could create moments of joy in unexpected places. As the day drew toward evening, the waitress paused for a brief moment by the counter, reflecting on the afternoon. She had seen the little girl laugh softly, draw with care, and express her feelings. She had witnessed the strength and resilience of a young child, navigating loneliness with courage. And she had felt the profound truth that her own efforts, though small in the grand scheme of life, had mattered greatly to someone who needed them. For the first time in many days, the waitress allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel a sense of quiet fulfillment. She had touched a life in a meaningful way, and in doing so, she had been reminded of the importance of empathy, patience, and kindness. And somewhere outside the diner, a little girl walked home a little lighter, carrying the warmth of someone who cared deeply for her, even if it was only for a short while. The next afternoon, the diner was humming with its usual rhythm. The smell of coffee and baked bread filled the air, and the soft chatter of the few early customers created a comforting background noise. The waitress moved quickly between tables, carrying trays, taking orders, and offering her usual warm smiles. She had grown used to the little girl's daily visits, and each time she arrived, it brought a quiet joy to her otherwise tiring day. The little girl appeared at the door, clutching her small bag tightly. She paused for a moment, glancing around the diner, as if checking that the waitress was there. When their eyes met, a small smile appeared on her face. The waitress waved gently. "Hello, I was hoping I'd see you today," she said softly. The girl hurried to her usual corner, sliding into the chair with the nervous excitement of someone who both wanted attention and feared it. The waitress noticed the slight tremor in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted around the diner as if expecting someone to be missing. She moved over and placed a warm cup of cocoa in front of her. "Here you go," she said. "It's all yours." The little girl's fingers wrapped around the cup, and she took a slow sip. The waitress watched her carefully, noticing the small details: the way she twirled a strand of hair around her finger, the quiet tapping of her foot on the floor, the way her eyes seemed to search the room. She could tell that something was different today. The girl's usual calm demeanor was shadowed by anticipation, a sense of waiting that seemed heavier than before. The waitress knelt beside her chair, careful not to startle her. "Are you expecting someone?" she asked gently. The girl nodded, but her lips pressed tightly together. "Yes, my dad said he would come," she whispered. "He's very busy, though. He said he would come later." The waitress smiled softly, understanding that this wasn't the first time the child had waited alone. "Well, we'll wait together for a little while then," she said. "Sometimes waiting is easier when someone is by your side." The girl's eyes lit up slightly and she nodded. There was something comforting in the waitress's presence, something that made her feel less invisible, less alone. She had started to trust this stranger in the small diner, and it was a trust that had been carefully earned through days of attention, kindness, and quiet listening. As the afternoon stretched on, the diner became busier. More customers arrived, ordering meals and chatting with friends. The waitress moved among them efficiently, taking care of each table while keeping an eye on the little girl. She noticed the child's gaze constantly drifting toward the door. A mixture of hope and worry etched on her small face, and then, just as the waitress brought a plate of warm soup to a nearby table, the door opened with a soft jingle. The sound made the little girl freeze, her eyes widening as she turned toward the entrance. A tall man stepped inside, his presence immediately noticeable. He carried himself with quiet confidence, dressed neatly, and his eyes scanned the diner as if searching for someone. The waitress didn't recognize him, and neither did most of the customers. He walked slowly, his gaze finally settling on the little girl in the corner. The child's face lit up, a mixture of relief and excitement washing over her features. She stood on tiptoe, clutching her bag tightly. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice trembling with hope. The man's face softened immediately. He approached the table and knelt down to her level. "Hello, sweetheart," he said warmly. "I'm sorry I was late. I had a lot of work today, but I promised I would be here, didn't I?" The little girl nodded vigorously, a smile spreading across her face. "Yes, you're here," she exclaimed softly, a mix of joy and disbelief in her voice. She hugged him quickly, holding on as if to make sure he wouldn't disappear again. The waitress watched the scene with a mixture of curiosity and surprise. There was something different about the man, something she couldn't quite place. He had a calm, quiet authority, and yet there was warmth in the way he interacted with the child. She continued her work, delivering food to other tables, but she couldn't help glancing back at them from time to time. The man noticed her watching and smiled politely. "Thank you for taking care of her," he said sincerely. "She seems very happy here." The waitress paused, a little startled by the comment. She smiled softly. "She's a wonderful child. I just try to make her feel welcome and comfortable." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I can see that. Not everyone would take the time to do what you do. Most people are too busy with their own lives." The waitress shrugged modestly. "It's not much," she said. "I just care." The man's eyes softened. He looked at her with a quiet admiration that made her uneasy, not because of pride, but because she didn't understand why a stranger's gaze held such meaning. "Caring is a rare quality," he said gently, "and it can make a bigger difference than most people realize." Meanwhile, the little girl chattered happily with her father, telling him about her day, about the drawings she had made, and about the kind woman who had been listening to her stories. The waitress listened quietly, her heart swelling at the realization that her small acts of kindness had brought genuine joy to this child. The man leaned back slightly, observing the waitress carefully. He noticed the exhaustion in her movements, the care in her expressions, and the way she seemed to put the child's comfort above her own needs. He saw the warmth she radiated, a kindness that could not be bought or taught. It moved him deeply. He had grown up surrounded by wealth, luxury, and influence, yet he rarely encountered genuine compassion. People treated him politely, but few showed the kind of attention and sincerity he now witnessed in this young waitress. She had no reason to act kindly toward his daughter, yet she did it anyway. It was a rare, precious quality, one he had learned to recognize as invaluable. The waitress continued her work, but now she felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. She didn't yet know the man's true identity, but she sensed that there was more to him than met the eye. He didn't act like the wealthy, powerful figures she had only read about in newspapers or seen on television. He was gentle, patient, and genuinely interested in the happiness of his child. As the afternoon passed, the diner became quieter again. The little girl's father stayed by her side, speaking softly and laughing gently at her stories. The waitress moved nearby, topping up drinks and clearing plates, careful to remain unobtrusive but always watching over them. At one point, the man spoke to the waitress again. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but you've been very kind to her. How do you know her?" The waitress shook her head, her tone humble. "I don't really. She comes here sometimes. I just try to make her feel welcome." "That's all?" He nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on her. "That's more than most people do," he said quietly. "You don't realize how important that is." For a moment, there was silence between them, a quiet understanding passing through the space. The waitress felt something stirring in her chest, a mixture of curiosity and unease. She didn't understand why this man's words carried weight, why his presence seemed so significant. All she knew was that she had done what she always did, shown care, kindness, and attention, and it had mattered in a way she hadn't anticipated. The little girl's laughter broke the moment, and the waitress turned her attention back to her, smiling softly. The child's happiness was contagious, filling the diner with a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun outside or the aroma of food. It was a warmth that came from human connection, from the recognition that someone cared deeply about her well-being. The man continued to watch the waitress with quiet admiration. He had spent his life surrounded by money, influence, and people who were polite out of obligation or self-interest. But here was someone whose kindness was genuine, effortless, and unassuming. He realized in that moment that he wanted to acknowledge her, to let her know how much her actions had meant, not just to his daughter, but to him as well. He spoke again, his voice low but steady. "You have a gift," he said. "A gift for caring, for seeing someone's needs without expecting anything in return. That's rare, very rare." The waitress looked at him, a little startled by the sincerity in his tone. She wasn't used to praise, especially from strangers, and she didn't yet understand the weight of his words. I just try to do my best," she said quietly. He nodded, smiling gently. "Your best is extraordinary," he said. "And it doesn't go unnoticed, even if you think it does." As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long golden beams through the diner windows, the little girl rested her head on her father's shoulder, tired but happy. The waitress continued her work, but her thoughts lingered on the interaction, on the small moments of connection she had shared with both the child and this quiet, dignified man. She didn't yet know the full story, but she could feel that her life, and perhaps theirs, was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. The little girl held her father's hand as they walked toward the counter, her small grip tight with excitement. She wanted him to see the woman who had become her quiet friend, the one who had listened to her stories, encouraged her drawings, and made her feel cared for when loneliness seemed to be her only companion. The waitress looked up from wiping the counter, surprised to see the child's father approaching her. There was something in his presence, calm, confident yet gentle, that made her pause, though she didn't yet understand why. "Hello," he said warmly, his voice carrying an unusual mixture of respect and sincerity. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything, but I wanted to thank you." The waitress blinked, unsure what he meant. She shook her head. "Oh no, you're not interrupting," she said softly. "I was just doing my work. I help your daughter a little, that's all." He smiled gently. "It's more than that," he said. "You've done something very rare. You've treated her with genuine care, attention, and kindness even when you had no reason to. Most people don't. Most people are too busy with themselves to notice." The waitress felt a warmth spreading through her chest. She had always tried to be kind, to help when she could, and to listen when someone needed attention. But no one had ever spoken to her like this before, with such recognition. She shook her head slightly, a soft smile forming. I try to do the right thing," she said. He looked at her closely, his gaze thoughtful and deliberate. "The right thing in your case has made a bigger difference than you know," he said. "It has made a difference in my daughter's life, and it has made me see something extraordinary about you." The waitress blinked, unsure what he meant. She had no idea that this man, who spoke so calmly and kindly, was the father of the little girl, or that he was far more significant in the world than anyone she had ever met. The little girl tugged gently at the waitress's apron. "She helped me," she whispered to her father. "She listened to my stories, and she made me feel happy when I was lonely." The man's eyes softened and he knelt beside the little girl, hugging her gently. "I see that," he said quietly. Then he turned back to the waitress. "I want you to know how much this means," he said. "It's rare to find someone who shows this kind of care without expecting anything in return. You have a remarkable heart." The waitress felt a lump in her throat. She wasn't used to such praise, and she felt both grateful and embarrassed. I didn't do it for praise," she said softly. "I just wanted her to feel safe, to feel happy for a little while." He nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. "That's exactly why it's extraordinary," he said, "because it came from the heart. You didn't ask for anything, you didn't expect anything, and that's what makes it special." There was a pause. The little girl watched silently, sensing that something important was happening, though she didn't fully understand what. Her eyes flicked between the waitress and her father, curiosity and excitement mixed together. The man took a deep breath, then spoke again. "I want to offer you an opportunity," he said. "I see the challenges you face, the hard work you put in, and the care you give. Not just to my daughter, but to everyone around you. I want to help you in a way that could change your life." The waitress's eyes widened slightly. She shook her head. I couldn't accept anything," she said quietly. "I'm just doing my job. I don't need help." He smiled warmly, shaking his head. "It's not charity," he said. "It's recognition. You deserve a chance to make life easier for yourself, to achieve things that you've worked so hard for but might not have had the chance to reach. I want to support you in whatever way I can, education, work, or financial stability. I want to give you options you didn't have before." Her heart raced. She had worked tirelessly, day after day, struggling to make ends meet. And yet here was someone offering her a chance to change her life. She felt overwhelmed, a mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and hope swirling inside her. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never expected this." He smiled again. "You don't have to say anything yet," he said gently. "Take your time. Just know that your kindness did not go unnoticed. It created a ripple effect, touching lives in ways you can't imagine, and now I want to help you too." The little girl hugged the waitress tightly, as if sensing that something wonderful was happening. "See?" she whispered. "You're amazing. You made me happy, and now maybe something amazing is happening for you too." The waitress hugged her back, feeling the warmth of the child's small arms and the trust that had grown between them. She felt a sense of fulfillment, a deep emotional connection that went beyond simple words. She realized that the small acts she had performed, the listening, the cookies, the smiles, had led to this moment, this life-changing opportunity. The man watched silently, allowing the moment to linger. He had grown accustomed to people seeking his attention for his wealth, influence, or power. But here was someone whose value could not be measured in money. Her heart, her kindness, and her ability to care for someone else selflessly were priceless. And now, he had the chance to give back in a meaningful way. "I want you to know," he said finally, "that this is not a gift to be taken lightly. It is a chance to make life a little easier, to pursue dreams you may have put aside, and to have the security you deserve. You've earned it, not because of who you know, but because of who you are." The waitress felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had spent years working tirelessly, often unnoticed, often underappreciated, and now someone recognized her efforts and offered her a path forward. She felt gratitude so deep it was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. I will never forget this. I promise I'll make the most of it." The man smiled, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "I know you will," he said, "and I hope that one day you continue to spread the same kindness and care to others, just as you have done here." The little girl's eyes shone with happiness. "See?" she said softly. "Good things happen when you are kind." The waitress hugged her again, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. She realized that her life was about to change, not because she had asked for it, but because she had chosen to be kind, patient, and caring. She had treated a lonely child with compassion, and in doing so she had created a chain of events that would shape her future in ways she had never imagined. Over the next few weeks, the waitress began to see the impact of this unexpected opportunity. The man helped her with financial support, ensuring that her family's needs were met. He arranged for her to receive educational opportunities she had once only dreamed of. And through it all, he remained humble, never flaunting his wealth, but simply showing that he valued her character and her heart. The diner remained a familiar place for her, a reminder of where it all began. She continued to work there sometimes, not because she had to, but because it had become a part of her life, and because it was where she had met someone who changed everything. And the little girl continued to visit, now happy and confident, knowing that she had someone who cared deeply for her and someone else who believed in the goodness of the world. The waitress often reflected on that first day when a lonely child had entered the diner and changed her life without even knowing it. She realized that small acts of kindness, attention, and care could have consequences far beyond what anyone could imagine. A simple gesture, a warm smile, a listening ear, a small cookie, had grown into an opportunity that transformed her life completely. She also learned something important about humanity, that wealth and power were not what mattered most. What mattered was the ability to care, to notice, and to act with genuine kindness. And that realization gave her a sense of purpose she had never had before. In the end, the waitress continued to live her life with the same heart, the same humility, and the same kindness that had guided her from the start. But now she walked with confidence, knowing that her actions mattered, that her choices had power, and that goodness, when practiced sincerely, could change lives in ways no one could predict. And somewhere the little girl laughed freely, her eyes bright, her heart full, and her world a little warmer, all because a young waitress had taken the time to care.